Olivia.
Hi. I'm very excited about our episode today. But before we jump into that, welcome to the MixTape, everybody. I'm Olivia. That is Sarah. And we're the ladies behind the MixTape. The MixTape is a part of the Parent Trip. We offer resource fairs, informational panels, this vlog series, and we're just generally all about rolling down the road of parenting alongside you because you shouldn't have to do it by yourself.
It's not designed that way. It's too hard.
Yep. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, also Patreon. The reason why we do a Patreon is because none of these things that we offer cost any money. You can come to our fairs for free. You can watch our informational panels for free, and you can enjoy us here on YouTube for free. But a little bit of money would make this easier for us to do. So if you would like to help us out.
I think the big key is sustainability, right? Like for us to continue doing this long-term and versus being like a couple-year project, we're going to need either sponsors if you want to come sponsor our events or this channel. We're open to that, but also Patreon is a super easy way that you, as someone who is hopefully learning from us and gaining insight, can give us like $1 a month, and it's super tiny on your pocketbook.
Yep. Our first goal is to make it to between however many providers it is, $40 a month. That would cover all of our streaming costs. And that would be amazing because then we wouldn't be paying out of pocket for this.
Yeah, be great.
Okay. So the reason why I'm excited about today's topic is because today I am going to have the exquisite pleasure of interviewing Sarah about her work as an IBCLC. What's an IBCLC, Sarah?
International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. So that means that I have gone through the standards that the board puts forward, 90 hours of lactation-specific education, a bunch of prerequisites for science, hours as far as experience with clients, and that kind of thing. And then I sat for the exam and was certified.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So there are all sorts of lactation support, right? There's like lactation counselors and there's consultants. What's the difference between those?
So a lot of those certifications can be completed in like a weekend, or maybe it's just a couple months, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean they don't have lots of wonderful insight. It's just a different standard of education. This is kind of trying to get us closer to, so lactation as a profession is super new. It's like 30 some years old, which means that we're still kind of wiggling our way into the medical field as respected professionals. And so this has like been the process that they have tried to do to say, we're educating them on all the body stuff, emotional stuff, all the different things. And they have to actually learn it enough to sit for this exam. They have to recertify every 5 years. Like we're creating a professional standard.
So does that mean if I'm a pregnant person and I'm looking for like the most rigorous standards in order to hire a professional to support me, does that mean I'm looking for an IBCLC?
Yeah, that's about as high up as it goes. Now, how people came to become an IBCLC is there's a couple of different ways you can do it. So if you want to get like really nitpicky about it, there are folks that actually go to a college program to become an IBCLC, and they get their hours a very specific way, and it's a whole program. So I suppose that would be maybe the one that like if you wanted to be as like intense on how someone became that would maybe be like the most professional. But they've designed these different pathways to where you have to have like more hours if you go this way, less hours if you do it this way. So it's trying to balance out the differences.
Yeah, totally. So tell me which pathway you took.
So I took pathway 1 out of 3, which is technically designed for medical professionals. So it's generally like the labor and delivery nurses who are already getting hands-on experience.
Right.
I went the route of it's also designed for those of us who are in a volunteer setting working with parents who are lactating. So I was a La Leche League leader. And so I was able to accumulate my hours that way, which has its own pros and cons. It's been very interesting kind of on the other side of it, kind of getting feelings about how all of the pathways are run and designed, and setting a standard for myself in my level of care and education that I want. And so I just am doing my own continuing education, always trying to grow and stay on top of medical research and all these different things, and which I love because I nerd out about it. So it's like, shucks, I have to go to another conference.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I feel like I jumped into questions really quick because we use these terms pretty fluidly, the IBCLC, the whatever, and I just wanted to lay the groundwork with that. So taking a deep breath and going into like questions for you, Sarah, as opposed to like, what are these Googleable terms?
Yeah.
How did you get into lactation work? Like, how did that happen for you?
So like a lot of people who work with parents, it's often our own experiences that really fuel us to kind of go to where we are and want to be in that field. So I had my first kiddo just a little over 11 years ago. We celebrated her birthday last week. And man, that was a trip. It's just such an intense time in people's lives. And I have always loved one-on-one work with people. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology because I thought that sounded really great to be a therapist, to work one-on-one with people, to hear about their lives, to help kind of be a part of their journey. And that didn't really turn into anything. I got into social work after that, and I loved that. One of my favorite pieces about all the different social work jobs that I had was creating these individualized plans for people, like recognizing that no one person is alike, no one solution works for everybody. And I loved that part. I loved digging deep with them to figure out what was going to work for them. And so I'd like done all these different things, but I still was like, what am I going to do with my life? I don't know. I want to have babies. Like I could go get a master's degree and a bunch of debt and then have babies, or I could have babies and figure out what I want to do with myself. So that's the route I went. So we had our first kid 11 years ago, and breastfeeding was rough. I was in a lot of pain, and my baby was not gaining a lot of weight. Her name was Maya. She was always in like the 5th percentile. I was like having to like steel myself every time that I nursed, and I have a pretty high pain tolerance. Like I can handle a lot. And it was rough, and I ended up with damaged tissue. And you know, in hindsight, I should have gotten support. I should have called somebody. And I didn't. Part of it was my stubbornness and like feeling like I can do it myself. I got this. But also I just didn't really know. I don't think that it was an option, and it wasn't a part of my healthcare like suggestions from my team. At least not that I remember. Sorry to my midwife if I'm remembering that wrong. And so then fast forward a few years, and I had my second kid, and I got help from, it wasn't a lactation consultant, but it was the nurse who visited at home because I had a home birth. And I was having a little bit of pain, and I decided to mention it because I didn't want to go through that again. And she helped me like adjust my position, and the pain was gone. And all of a sudden everything was like going just fine. And I will say with both kids, all my kids, but I have 3. But I did end up nursing Maya till 21 months. Like we got through that pain. It did not endure the entire time. We did make it without a lactation consultant. But now that I know what kind of support is out there, and just like wishing that for my past self, that I could have had someone to hear me and someone to help me figure out what's going on, like I would definitely change that for sure. And then my second kiddo, we went on to nurse for 26 months. I did the math at one point. I have nursed 7 years of my life.
Damn.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I am thrilled to have my body back to myself now.
Yeah.
But it was very worth it, and a wonderful experience with all 3 of them. So I basically realized that support made a huge difference, and that nursing didn't have to be that hard. It didn't have to hurt. And was trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself, right? Like I'd had 2 kids. Now what? Now is time to start figuring out who I want to be. And PCC was offering an informational course on this lactation, the stuff they were going to do. And so I decided to go and check it out. And I just got so excited. Like, it kind of put together all these things I had explored, right? It put together the emotional psychology piece. It put together the brainstorming individualized plan piece. I've also always loved babies. So that piece was like just icing on the cake, right?
Yeah.
And then now that I'd been in this postpartum realm, like my passion for wanting to support other parents in that vulnerable spot was just, it sounded amazing and very fulfilling. So I decided to just go for it. And we had wonderful support from both my parents and my in-laws. They supported watching the kids while I went back to school, and did a bunch of science courses on the weekends. And I geeked out. It was so fun. And these were all of the like prereq classes to before you go into your lactation work. And my plan had been to join PCC's Pathway 2 program that they had. So you take these courses to apply to the program. And then if you get accepted, they teach you lactation all the 90 hours in person. And they also connect you with the internship hours that you need to sit for the exam. And I was so excited about like the local connections to other lactation professionals. And I'm an extrovert. So I was like, yeah, let's do this like interactive thing I'm in. Talking to other adults. Like I was definitely in toddlerhood all the time. Like it sounded great. And I got through the halfway point. No, almost the end point of my second anatomy and physiology class, which was required for the PCC route, but not the other one. Mm-hmm. When I got the letter that they were discontinuing the PCC program.
No.
Yeah. So I did not actually have to take that course in the end, but I passed it and I'm glad I took it. I liked it. It was fun.
Yeah.
But it was very frustrating because I was back to square one as far as trying to figure out how I wanted to get this lactation specific and stuff. And, like I was already a La Leche league leader. I knew I could get my hours that way. But I was very excited about the idea of a guided mentorship intern situation. So I just kind of felt like I lost all my oars while I was paddling to a destination. Yeah. But I figured it out. There's lots of online resources now, which is great. So I got my 90 hours online, and I got all my hours through being a La Leche League leader. Some things have changed since that time, like the way that they're counting hours and doing volunteer experience has changed a little bit. And I think it's probably for the better. But it worked for me then. It was a great way that I could get my hours and still have my kids with me. I didn't have to find childcare. La Leche League is super child-parent relationship centric. So I could always take my babies with me and help facilitate these groups while also nursing my own kids in front of everybody, which is something that I think, just a little soapbox for a second. I think this is something that we're missing in our society. Like there are stories that have gone out about gorillas who had babies and didn't know how to nurse them. And so they had these like local nursing parents come and be like in front of the exhibits nursing their babies. And then the gorillas figured it out. Like we are meant to exist in society where we show each other how things are done. And instead we're in these little boxes and ashamed of showing our breasts to anybody ever in any capacity. And so we're not exposed to this as a normal thing and a thing that like I actually have information about before I do it. So that's one of the things I loved about La Leche League was it was this place where monthly these parents could come together and, find out, is this thing normal? Is this thing something I should call a professional about? How do you do it? Last month was really hard. This month I'm great. You can do it. Like this, I feel like it's the way that we're supposed to exist.
Yeah.
So find yourself a support group. You now go do it. Even if it's online.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where was I?
You were going to La Leche League. You decided to do Pathway 1 instead.
Yeah. So I got all my hours and I finished up all my courses and I sat for the exam and I passed. I mean, it was like, I mean, I say that like it was easy. I stressed out a lot and studied a lot. But I was able to do that. And then 3 months later, Opus Lactation was born. I birthed my 4th baby. Yeah, all this happened in all this time that I was doing all this. I had my 3rd kiddo, Reese, who is now 4.5. So it took me a few years to get all the prerequisites done and do all the education online. But the way that I did it was nice in that it was fairly self-paced. Like they have some limits on how long it can be between the start and the end.
Right.
Whereas if I had gone to PCC, it would have been a very vigorous program that would have taken a lot less time. And for all I know, I wouldn't have even ended up having a 3rd kid.
Yeah.
You know, like who knows what life would have looked like. Yeah, so I've been doing private practice for about 3 years now, Opus Lactation. It's just me. And I love it. I do primarily home visits. And that's my journey to where I am here.
Yeah. So my next question for you is like, who should consider lactation support?
Pregnant folks would be great. It's something that often gets skipped as we focus on the birth primarily, which is understandable. Like it's this big thing you can't avoid giving birth. Like you could choose to formula feed.
Yeah.
You know, like you can't avoid giving birth once you're pregnant. So it's good that you focus a lot on preparing for birth. But ideally, folks would get educated on kind of how lactation works and how it might affect your life, positives and negatives, ahead of time so that you kind of go into your sleep-deprived, fluctuating hormones, learning a new tiny human stage with information rather than trying to get it all frantically in the moment. Yeah. But even if you don't do that, I mean, I can see folks at any point. Right away is great. Even if things are going well, it can be great to just start that relationship so that if something happens, like cluster feeding is one that really freaks people out, where the baby just wants to eat and eat and eat and eat for hours. And you're like, what's wrong? And just to have someone that you can call or email or whatever and just be like, what's happening? And I can say, this is a normal part of parenting where your baby is signaling to your body that they're ready to grow. And so you need to make a little more milk.
Yeah.
And then you can just be like, oh, normal. Got it. Okay. Anxiety levels can come down a little. I could also serve you if you are not pregnant and you are looking to bring a baby into your life through other means, whether it's adoption or surrogacy. I can help with that too, if that's something that you would like to nurse your baby, or even if, like, whether it's you nursing your baby or you're hoping to bring breast milk in from that situation, it can be really nice to have a lactation consultant kind of on hand to help go through that whole situation.
Yeah, totally. That's amazing.
So basically everybody.
That's what I was going to say, is basically everybody. So people who are pregnant, people who have just had their baby, people who are looking at not going through a pregnancy themselves in order to welcome their baby. And what about people who have like toddlers?
Sure. Yeah. Weaning is something that I feel like lactation consultants don't get utilized for enough. Or even before weaning, like there's big shifts that happen with getting teeth and solid foods and stuff. But I would love to see folks utilizing lactation consultants more for weaning, because there can be a lot of complications that come with that, from getting mastitis or clogged ducts, or just how it affects your hormones.
So can I ask you to make the argument for me and for everyone watching of, let's say I have Kaiser insurance and I'm going to be delivering at a Kaiser hospital, and Kaiser has a lactation consultant team. Why should I consider hiring a private lactation consultant?
Sure. A big piece is just continuity of care, being able to have the same professional with you for your whole journey. You're not going to be able to call Kaiser before your birth and say, can I see one of your LCs? I mean, I guess I don't know. I haven't tried that personally, but most of those systems are built within their hospital rotations to where you have the baby, the lactation consultant comes to visit, and it's whoever's on shift. Whereas in my case, as a private practice, you can get to know me while you're pregnant. I can be in your home whenever you are ready to have visitors. And then we can stay in contact for years. My shift doesn't end.
Yeah, totally.
The other piece too is that if you do want to use a hospital lactation consultant, which is great that they're there as a resource, you just don't get quite the same time and attention that you would get from me. I get your information ahead of time, and I give myself time to review all of that you fill out for me, so that I come very prepared. And not to say that hospital lactation consultants don't read your chart, but the amount of time that they have to give to that is going to be different than the time that I have. And then the amount of time they have in the room with you is going to be different. My initial appointments are up to 2 hours in your home.
Wow.
So the way it's been right now with COVID, we've been doing the first hour online. So that we can kind of talk through your history and how you're feeling. And sometimes we can actually resolve all of the problems virtually. I really love seeing y'all in person. It's my favorite. And, getting to hold babies and stuff. But it is great that sometimes these problems can be resolved virtually. But then if we get to the end of that session and realize, no, we need to have an oral assessment done. We need to look a little bit at positioning or different ways you sit in different parts of your house. That's what's great about home visits is the way that I would nurse in this chair is very different from my couch out in my living room. And so to have someone be able to observe you in those different positions and say, oh, well, when you sit here, you definitely need to have an extra pillow on this side or whatever. Or maybe you should just avoid that chair altogether.
Yeah. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Man. Sorry, I'm just learning a lot right now. I didn't realize that your first visits were 2 hours. That just feels really like you must be doing holistic work is what that tells me. Like you're talking about the space, but it's also looking at your equipment, hearing you talk about your experience. It's not just okay, let's put the baby on. Let's see what's happening here, right?
And that's part of why it's 2 hours is that you don't really get to tell babies what to do. They kind of do what they want to do. So having that 2 hour window allows us to feel a little more comfortable that I'll get to observe a feeding session while I'm with you. So if I arrive and baby's hungry, we do it right off the bat. If baby's sleeping, then we take that time and we talk about your birthing experience and we talk about how you've been feeling emotionally and physically, because all those things are so important. If you're dealing with a lot of postpartum anxiety or depression, it's going to very directly impact how you're going to handle a baby that needs to feed every couple hours or sometimes even more frequently, especially if you add pain into it or anything else. So we really need to attend to all of the different aspects of what postpartum has been like for you. So there's a lot of time spent talking and me listening. But I do also do hands-on oral exam of the baby to make sure all of the anatomy with the tongue and the palate and all that kind of stuff is where it should be.
Do you have any gear you bring?
I always bring a scale. I am not a huge proponent of weighted feeds. Obviously, there are cases where they're super important, but on average, I do not recommend that parents go out and buy scales and weigh their babies before and after feeds and all of that. It's just one piece of information that I can use to help figure out what's going on. So I always bring a scale. I always have gloves because I use gloves for my oral exams, headlamp so I can see inside their tiny mouths. Man, you don't realize how tiny their mouths are until you try to fit your 2 pinkies under their tongues. They're so tiny.
I have never tried to do that, but I imagine that it is really small in there.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't need a ton of equipment, which is great.
Yeah.
We're mostly working with the equipment that mom has.
I think I've got a couple more questions left for you. Okay. My first one would be, and it can be something really small, minutia, but what is your favorite part of being a lactation consultant?
I love watching parents tune into their intuition and start to trust who they are as parents. I always like to tell families, like, you know your baby better than anybody. Like no amount of training in medical school, or for me with my lactation work, none of that can tell me anything about your baby. And so it's a big piece that I teach people and really try to encourage, is that they trust their gut, and that they, if they think baby's still hungry, trust that. That's okay. Like maybe baby ate 20 minutes ago. I don't care. You're not going to overfeed your baby. And that's my job, to be here to tell you, you're not going to overfeed your baby. But watching parents come into that and start making decisions based on the relationship that they have versus a medical professional, I just think I love it so much.
And then I guess the reverse of that is like, what's the biggest challenge being a lactation consultant? Like, what's the thing that's a struggle?
I think shame culture. And I think that applies in a lot of different ways. I hate that parents, feel like they have to buy a bunch of covers to cover up in public. I hate that there's this mommy war thing between, if you don't nurse your baby, you're not as good of a parent, which is not true. I wish that we could be comfortable being here in these bodies, doing the best we can, and that we could get out of breast being sexualized, and we could get out of this need of, if my body doesn't do this, then I'm bad, right? Like that's one of the big things for folks who are worried about their milk supply. It's almost never that baby is going to starve, because they're not. We live in a culture where formula exists. It is a good alternative. Like your baby's not going to starve, but because their body's not producing milk, they internalize all this shame and this negative feelings. And I hate that. Like your body is magic. Everything that you're giving your baby, whether it's your milk or your love, is amazing. And that's all they need. That's all your baby needs. And that's the part that I think is really hard, is because I get to watch the results of all of that shame culture constantly. A lot of the worries that people come to me with are not even real, but they've just been surrounded by all of this like doubt on how well you can perform and different stuff, and internalized it. And I wish we didn't have to do that to each other.
Yeah. Ugh. What's one thing that, like, if you had like a magic megaphone and you could get a message into every lactating person's home, what's one thing that you wish everybody knew?
Milk supply is supply and demand. So if you're not removing milk, you're not going to make milk. So when folks talk to you about feeding on schedule or trying to get your baby to sleep through the night, all those things are going to impact your milk supply.
So it's like demand and supply.
Yeah.
Right? That it's like, yes.
Yeah. You remove milk to make milk.
Yeah.
You're not like sitting there storing it up like a piggy bank. Money, it has to keep flowing. Money likes to flow. Milk likes to flow.
Okay. Yeah.
I would also love to have a megaphone to shout to every medical professional and insurance provider that lactation support is essential and should be included for every single person who's had a baby.
Yeah.
Whether they want to breastfeed or not, that's the thing. Like, I can be here to help support you in weaning your baby so that you can formula feed, so that you don't have to go through mastitis, like this massive infection that causes you to have a fever and pain and all this stuff while you're adjusting to having a new baby.
Yeah.
Like everybody should have the support of a professional who understands this anatomy. Like doctors and pediatricians just don't get as much education in how it all works. So if every single person could have that available to them, I think postpartum would go a lot smoother.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Is there anything else that you want to talk about when it comes to lactation? Anything else that you're like, you super nerd about that's like your favorite thing to talk about?
Well, I mean, I could talk about inducing lactation, but I think we'll do a whole nother episode on that sometime about how all bodies can make milk, whether they've birthed babies or not. I think the soapbox I would like to end on is this. breastfeeding can be really hard in the beginning. And I think we get that message a lot. Like there was a recent commercial that came out during the Super Bowl that was all that like very much highlighted that fact. You dive into any forums or blog posts, or you talk to your mom friends, they'll probably talk to you about how it was hard or how they miss having their body to themselves or how it was painful. Like there's lots of negativity, I feel like, in the world around us. And I'd love to like end this on how breastfeeding is positive. And I don't mean it in like the immune factors. I don't mean it in nutrition. I mean it in the connection for your baby and you. And then like, if you continue on, like your toddler and you, man, when they start moving, they don't want to stop. Mm-hmm. But then they remember like, oh, mom's over there, I'm hungry, or I hurt myself and mom's over there with milk. And it's like this moment to like touch and calm and be still for a minute. Not always still. There's also nursing gymnastics, which is just hilarious.
What's that called? Niplash? Where they? Oh, God.
No, that's not the fun part. Don't talk about that part right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I've seen really amazing pictures of toddlers doing like practically handstands while latched and stuff. And that can be comfortable, believe it or not. And there's just a lot of really wonderful stuff that can come from getting through that hard part. And it's not hard for everybody, but if it's hard for you, if you're in it right now and it's hard, take it like a day at a time, a week at a time. Like things change so fast when they're little. And when you come out on the other side and you're not having to wash bottles, you're not having to remember to take food with you. Or like if you don't run out, you know, like if you're out at the store and if you have just formula and they drink a whole bottle and they're still hungry, you're not going to have to go home. Like it's built in. Not to mention there's a lot of things that we think are great for them as far as like the way that the mouth develops with the muscles and the teeth and everything and all the other wonderful things. But that connection and the ease and the financial ease too, like if you can make it work, breastfeeding can be a much more economical way to feed your baby. There's a lot of really wonderful things. And so one of the hard things for me is that the people who call me aren't the people who are having an easy time.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of what I deal with are the hard times. So you're probably not going to call me if things are going great. And I'm so glad for you. But if you are going through a hard time and you call me, we can get you to that point, you know? We can figure out what's going on, whether it's anatomy or position or whatever it is. And we can get to that point where it's like, it gives back so much more than it takes, which it doesn't feel like sometimes when it's hard.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, thank you so much for answering all my questions and letting us do a little deep dive on lactation. Yeah. Your hair has been covering the second half of your shirt. Can you lactivist?
Some wonderful doula gave me this shirt.
I don't know who that is.
Which means I also don't know where it came from. So I don't know if you remember, but.
I want to say is Lauren, I can't remember her last name. I think her name's the Birth Nerd.
Okay.
I want to say it's her shop.
Cool. We'll have to figure it out and see if it's still sold. We'll put a link.
Right. Totally. But yeah, thanks for talking to me about lactation. Hey, everybody, if you have questions for Sarah, you can always reach her through us, The Parent Trip. She's one half of this team. So anything you send will get seen by her. You can also reach out to her on her own platform at Opus Lactation. You can find her website or her Instagram or anything of like that. And if you are in the Portland area and you want in-home lactation support, or if you're anywhere in the world and you want virtual lactation support, you should hit up this purple-haired IBCLC.
Thank you so much. I love nerding out about it. So
yeah, we're similar in that way. We love our nerd topics. All right. Thanks, everybody. Beep, beep. Beep, beep. Thanks for watching. If you liked our channel, please make sure that you hit the button at the bottom and subscribe so you don't miss any other videos we have coming up.
If you want to know the moment we post, hit that little bell.
Ding, ding. We're also on Facebook and Instagram.
At The Parent Trip PDX.
And we have a Patreon that we'd love you to check out.
Keeping our content free and accessible for all families is really important to us. So the Patreon is one way that you can help us keep creating content and doing this for a long time.
Thanks.